Welcome to The Intentional Exit, a leadership legacy podcast for those who don't just want to retire, but want to do it well. I'm Rebecca Schriver, and this is where we help you protect what you've built, reduce unnecessary taxes, and create a plan that gives you clarity, confidence, and control. So together, we make sure your exit is not accidental, it's intentional. Before we begin, please note that the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as tax, legal, or financial advice. For guidance specific to your situation, we recommend consulting with a qualified professional.
Taxes are not random, they're scheduled, and most people think that the taxes are built on how much money they have. But really, it's about when does that money hit? How is it organized? And what will that look like in the future? On episode 10, we're going to talk about tax stacking and how you can shift yourself out of the most taxable event during your lifetime into the most tax-free event you've ever experienced. I'm Rebecca Schriver. This is The Intentional Exit, and I'll be your host today to walk you through what is this tax stacking and how does it affect me in my retirement. So when we're looking at tax stacking, a lot of times I talk about how it all merges together at the same time. So I want you to think about a very busy highway. So if you're thinking about a very busy highway and you've got all of these different lanes of traffic coming in at the same time in the same point, if there's a lot of people on the road, it can create this congestion and this frustration. Well, that same type of frustration, whenever we're stacking too many dollars into the same year, can create higher and higher tax brackets. The other thing that it creates are IRMA costs, voluntary taxes on your Social Security, as well as reduced effectiveness of the dollars that you have. I spoke with a couple earlier today. They've been my client for a couple of years, and they've been listening to things and reading things, and it's all about this big, beautiful bill. So back in 2025, over the summer, it's been almost a year now, if you can believe it, they passed the big, beautiful bill. And what that did is it actually extended out the tax brackets, these low, favorable tax brackets, it extended them out permanently. Okay? But permanently is the wrong word. So they've been throwing it all over social media. People are saying, oh, we've got these permanent tax cuts. Permanent. Well, that's not true. I'm sorry. It's just not. It's unrealistic. For some reason, we are believing that these tax breaks that we're seeing are permanent. They're not. Okay. The reason that they're able to say this, okay, the reason that they're able to throw it around on the media, put it on the news, and talk about it under these permanent kind of language, right? This permanent rhetoric is that they didn't have a sunset clause. Okay, so the Jobs Creation Act, and I realize I'm going to throw a lot of crap at you today, but to me, education is the key, right? We're going to talk about a lot of different things that maybe you've never cared about before. And the reason that I want to throw them out to you, the reason I want to put them in front of you is because if we don't educate ourselves, we are going to subject ourselves to the past, right? We're going to repeat it. It's not going to be fun. So 2017, we had particular tax brackets. They weren't awful, but they weren't great. Okay. Then the Jobs Creation Act was passed. And what it did is it extended up. So basically it widened the amount of money that a person could earn. And it also lowered the amount of taxes that you would pay on any given dollar. So on dollars that you can literally today pay 22% on, in 2017, which wasn't that far ago, right? That's not that long ago. you would pay 28%. Well, that's a 6% difference. That's huge. Absolutely huge. As a matter of fact, so sorry, sidebar squirrel. I met with a lot of clients in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And for the clients who didn't know that we had had this tax rate adjustment, a lot of them got a new CPA that year. And they just raved. Oh my goodness, my CPA is so brilliant. They do a wonderful job. They lowered my taxes. Oh, accolades, right? But what they didn't realize was that what had happened is the tax bracket shifted, right? That what they were actually owing on those taxes went down because the federal government changed the game. And so when we're looking at this, we need to look back at 2017 and realize that the tax brackets were much higher. And so when the Jobs Creation Act, when the Job Creation Act was put into place, it basically said, we went from like, you can earn $200,000, you're going to pay, between 25 and 28% taxes on the high end, to now you can make almost $400,000, and the high end of your tax bracket is going to be sitting at 24%. That's a giant shift, okay? And if you bump slightly over that $200,000 in 2017, you were sitting closer to 32 or 35% in taxes, whereas now you have to bump over almost double that amount before you make it up to the 32% tax bracket. Now that's a married filing jointly. I am referring to married filing jointly for anybody who's gonna come at me in the comment section. I know, cut it in half when we're talking about single filers. But the point is that we believe that we're invincible, right? So people aren't wanting to get themselves into a tax-free position because they think that the taxes are going to be the same forever. But they're wrong. And they're wrong on many different levels. In episode 4, we talked a lot about the GDP, right? The gross domestic product versus inflation, versus our national debt, versus the stock market. And we've showed you, right? We talked a lot about how the World Financial Organization has come out and said, listen, United States, that's us, right? If you don't get your spending under control, then you are going to end up in a position where you're no longer financially sound and the rest of the world isn't going to foot the bill. And I realize that that may sound like fear tactics, but these are actual things that are going on. These are things that are actually happening in the United States and in the world right now. Well, there's only two ways to fix that problem. One is to raise the gross domestic product, or what the United States actually produces. Because if our income is higher, right, kind of like if you go out and get a mortgage, they're going to look at your debt to income ratio. If your income is higher, you can borrow more. Or we have to reduce our spending. I haven't seen any signs of that. But the easiest way and the only way for the United States to keep up with the debt is to do what? Generate revenue. How do they generate revenue? You pay it. You pay the revenue in the form of taxes. And these lower tax rates, right? These historically low tax rates, while they don't have a sunset clause that like they did with the Jobs Creation Act, right? They were supposed to sunset in 2025. They were going to go away. And we were supposed to, in this year, in 2026, revert back, right? We were supposed to go back to what they were in 2017. But then history happened. Trump got into the presidency, and one of his big things that he ran on was this extension of these tax cuts. And so he accomplished it, right? So I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent. It doesn't matter, okay? The tax rules are the tax rules based on what happened. But the only reason that they can say that they're permanent is because they don't have a sunset clause on them. That's what they're using to be able to say that they're permanent. That's what they're trying to tell you, and how they're trying to say that these tax rates are permanent. It does not mean that the new set of Congress, right, that the new people who get elected in, the new president in a couple of years, can't decide to change the game. And the World Financial Organization says, hey, by the way, you're almost at mission critical as far as your debt is concerned. Your gross domestic product to your actual, national debt is hitting a critical limit. They've taken the entire nation and put it on a high interest credit card. And when you look at that and you look at how are we going to recover, how are we going to get in line, they're going to have to raise taxes, right? There is no better solution as far as anyone's concerned other than to get you to have to pay more. We've seen with the tariffs, we've seen with all of these different things that they're just passing the buck on to the American people. We know people between 1946 and 1964 hold the majority, the high majority of the money inside of the United States. And if I know it, don't you think the people in Washington know it as well? That's part of the reason they passed the Secure Act. That's part of the reason that they targeted your forever taxable buckets to be able to pay back some of the money. That's why they condensed it down. They said, hey, your family can only hold on to it for 10 years. They no longer have their lifetime. Hey, by the way, if you leave an inherited IRA to this person and they pass away, there's no more 10-year time clock. They're going to have to experience that fully taxable event in year one. And if you don't, we're taking 50%. Why do you think that is? They're looking at the nation's money. Where is the nation's wealth? And they are targeting it to be able to pay back the national debt, or at least to keep it at bay so they can continue to borrow. And so when we're looking at this and we're talking about this tax stacking, right? We're talking about how do these taxes come into play? It's all about timing, right? It's all about your timing. What are you allowing to have happen? Because you have a choice. You can choose to pay the taxes in more favorable rates. You could actually even subsidize the taxes, right? There's that tax code too. Or you can sleepwalk into retirement, follow the plan that the government has laid out for you, and pay the most taxes possible during your retirement years. And as you do the full intentional exit, as you pass it through your estate, right? And the choice is yours. You get to decide. That's part of being an American citizen, is you get to decide how you want to have this happen. There are tax rules and tax code out there that are actually written in your favor, but it's not the default. You have to know how to use the tax code. You have to understand how do these things stack up in order to take advantage of what makes sense, right? So if we've got this highway and all of these different lanes are coming in at the same time, maybe you have business income. Maybe you set it up to where you sold the business and they're paying you out. Well, guess what? That's income. Maybe you have a pension. I hope you do, right? But if you have a pension as that money comes in, there's another layer of income. You've got interest and dividends from those stock accounts that you didn't put into a 401k IRA or Roth IRA. You have distributions from an IRA, Roth IRA, or sorry, not a Roth, IRA, 401k, 457, any of those types of accounts. Then you add Social Security. And what a lot of people don't realize is that they're actually going to be in the same exact tax bracket in retirement or even higher. And that's if everything stays the same. If the government, right, that changes laws all of the time starts waking up to everything that's happening, to the national debt, to the GDP, to all of these things that are moving us towards mission critical, and they do something about it because they would like for you and I not to live in a depression, the only way that they can do that, actually there's 3 ways, right? But the easiest way for them to do that is to tax you. Certain things we can't change, right? So if you have a pension coming in, most likely that's going to be taxed. Almost all pensions are taxed in retirement. Social Security, I know they said it was tax-free. It's not. Most people don't have to pay taxes on Social Security because they're living at poverty levels. If you have money, they're looking at you to pay the taxes, right? If you have money, you're going to pay taxes. So if your Social Security is higher than, most people's Social Security, guess what? You didn't get out of there tax-free. And when you start stacking things like business income, rental income, right? Maybe you have a couple rental properties. Pension, money from our savings account. Oh, well, we didn't take any money out of our brokerage account, but we shifted, right? We maybe moved some stocks, bonds, ETFs, whatever that looks like. We didn't stay in the same thing. So now we've got capital gains. And we start stacking these things on top of each other. You can see very quickly how your tax bracket grows. And so there are always going to be things that we can control and things that we cannot control, right? So what are the things that we can control? We can control what we do today with the IRS code that we have today. We can kind of sort of plan that over the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to look similar, right? Because we're in the same presidency. And I realize that this is making me look political. I promise you it's not. It's just the way the world works. But if we can look at the presidency and say he probably isn't going to go back and change what he did for the next 3 years, we have an opportunity window to take advantage of the tax brackets that got extended to put you into a better position, but don't do it alone. And the reason that I'm telling you don't do it alone is because if you are not prepared for the different things that can come along, if you're pre-retirement, let's talk about how you're going to pay those taxes, right? If you're in your 50s, we need to talk about how are you going to afford the taxes? Because pulling it out of that 401k or 403b or IRA is going to incur a penalty, and it may be too expensive. We may need to do it differently. It's possible, okay? If you're over 59 and a half and you don't have a penalty, right? You're not going to incur a penalty. Then guess what, right? We can do even more, right? We can make those shifts, right? If you have cash on the side, it doesn't matter. But if you don't have cash on the side, we can make those shifts without a problem. And then if you're already in retirement, maybe you've started Medicare, then we have additional things we need to talk about. There are speed bumps, right? There are speed bumps along the way. And so we want to make sure that you are highly aware of the benefits and the drawbacks. You are highly aware of the tax code that no one, I promise you, no one has talked to you about yet. You are aware of your timeline. You are aware of what bracket should I allow myself to go into. You maybe even have a subsidy coming, right? And I use the term subsidy loosely. I'm going to say that right now. Subsidizing your taxes is a very tricky thing, okay? And it's I'm kind of using that term loosely. I'm not talking about a government subsidy. I'm talking about ways to find a way, for lack of better terms, an ability to find a way to pay those taxes without it coming out of your pocket. Kind of sounds a little hokey. I know it sounds hokey, and I promise you it's not. I promise you that it is just simply using the tax code to your advantage. We're not even going to do anything really crazy. We're going to do the things that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I'm going to jail, 1 being I'm overpaying in taxes, we're sitting at a 3 and a 4, which means I don't want to overpay taxes, but I want to use my dollars in the most efficient way possible, right? And I've sat down with so many clients this week. It's been kind of a great week. I love sitting down with clients and educating them around these different things. But I've been talking to them about how can we put you in a position where you sit with tax-free dollars, but you didn't lose any value. How can you pay the government to go away, right, by giving them their portion while still holding on to almost all of your dollars? How can we do that? Well, you got to call to find out, okay? I'm not going to give away all of the sausage on the podcast. I apologize. You don't get the sausage for free. It's one of those things where you need to come see a professional, right? You need to call us. You need to email us. You need to come and see us so that we can look at your particular situation and create intention around this exit. We want your intentional exit to be just perfect, right? We want you to control as much as you can. We want you to hold on to as many of your dollars as you can. And I don't mean you can't spend them, but let's not gift them to the IRS. Let's hold on to as many of them as possible, because this is how we create generational wealth. It is the difference of finding out that tax code went up, right? All of a sudden you owe more in taxes and not knowing how that's going to pan out for your life. And maybe you're going to run out of money now, or you're going to have to change your lifestyle, or you're going to have to move houses because you can no longer afford it. And taking full control, owning your money, right? Getting out of the IRS's sandbox, taking the keys back. Take your keys back. Drive your own car. Own what you have. You have the option. Are you going to take advantage of it? Thank you so much today for listening to the Intentional Exit podcast. We so appreciate you taking the time to learn with us. We hope that you'll like, subscribe, and share us with a friend. Please note that this is not to be used as legal, tax, or financial advice. Everybody's particular situation deserves intention. I'm Rebecca Schriver. I hope this has been of value, and we'll see you next week.